Hello, Artisidi. Good to see you. So we're just about to start the second half, Artisidi, and Stephen's going to be talking first. So I wondered if you'd be happy to introduce him.
Lovely, great. Yeah, thanks, Virajyoti. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to introduce Stephen. I'm really delighted he's giving a talk today. So I've sort of known Stephen for a long time in a way, because he's been a Mitra for a long time. I think one of the things that's very apparent with Stephen is his sense of the altruistic, the outgoing, the social aspect of Buddhism, which has been a key theme in his life for a long time. He's been involved as an architect, but in international development work around the world for a long time. He's recently moved to work at New View, a Buddhist-run business. So he's continuing to sort of experiment and learn after a long career as an architect about how to live out that social aspect. So without further ado, that's a little bit about Stephen, and I very much look forward to what he's got to say about why he's a Mitra.
Yeah, thanks, Artisidi. So as you said, I've been a Mitra for a long time. I actually became a Mitra 15 years ago, believe it or not. So I suppose I should be quite an expert on the subject. And in fact, I was thinking that maybe a better title for me would be, why am I still a Mitra? There must be something about being a Mitra that I really enjoy, to have been one for so long. But I'll say a bit more about that later on. But the truth is, I have been very happy being a Mitra, and I've felt that it really suited my personal conditions very well for all this time. And I think becoming a Mitra is a very clear acknowledgement that one sees oneself as a Buddhist. So I probably need to say a little bit about how that came about for me. So I've been a person who was interested in religion and a spiritual seeker for most of my life, I suppose, since my early teenage years. And for 20 or so years before first coming to the Buddhist Centre in Cambridge, I've been a practicing Quaker. And I think of all the Christian denominations, perhaps Quakerism has most similarities with Buddhism in terms of their approach to the spiritual life. I've become very interested in meditation, and I first came, like many people, first came to the centre in Cambridge to learn meditation. And I just took to it almost immediately, like a duck to water, really. And I felt very strongly drawn both to the meditation practice, but also particularly to the friendliness that I experienced at the Cambridge Centre. It just felt a wonderfully warm and welcoming place, and that had a big impact on me as well. So enjoying meditation so much, I very quickly wanted to discover more about the sort of religious system or philosophy that lay behind it. And so when I finished the meditation course, I signed up for an Introduction to Buddhism course. And I can remember that even now, after all these years, very clearly feeling the sense of exhilaration that I felt, on that sense of discovering something very precious that I'd always had a sense of, but never before been able to quite grasp or really see. And I think I felt very, very early on, quite intuitively, that this was the path that I needed to follow, that I was a Buddhist. I can remember a number of moments that were very important to me, but one particular sort of moment of revelation, I think, was when, and I can't remember exactly when it was, but I can remember sort of seeing quite deeply into the truth of conditioned co-production, the idea of things arising in dependence upon conditions. And it was a kind of insight beyond words. And I saw that this could be a gateway to liberation from negative mental states, which at that time I, to some extent, suffered from. And I thought that with patience and courage, it's possible to change one's mind and thereby change one's whole perception and experience of the world. And this was real freedom, I felt. And I was very drawn to the teaching that just as all the oceans of the world have one flavor, the flavor of salt, so all my teachings, the Buddha said, have the taste of freedom. That really spoke deeply to me. So I think very early on I felt I was a convinced Buddhist. But the question for me was more which was the right path to follow. I was very aware that there are many forms of Buddhism. In fact, my first personal experience of Buddhism was when I lived as a VSO volunteer in Bhutan, which is a tantric Buddhist country in the Himalayas. So I'd experienced a very different form of Buddhism, but that was a wonderful experience and it made a deep impact on me, which in some ways I still feel is kind of feeding into my Buddhist life now. So yeah, I wanted to be really sure that this was the right path to follow in terms of the area of practice, as Virajyoti said, was it with Triratna? But I also then realized that I do perhaps have a natural tendency to prevarication, and perhaps I just kind of want to keep my options open for too long. So at a certain point I thought, no, I've got to make a commitment. And that was when I decided to ask to become a Mitra. And that was 3 years after I'd first come to the center. I can remember the period actually leading up to the Mitra ceremony and the ceremony itself and the period immediately afterwards very, very clearly as a time of great happiness, actually, and a sense of being about to embark on a life-changing journey. And life at that time felt very vivid and open to possibility. It was a wonderful experience, and it's kind of remained with that sense has remained with me. I think the term Mitra or friend is a very interesting one that has been chosen for this particular sort of status within the movement. And it does feel very appropriate. It has connotations for me of a close and sort of loving relationship with the Sangha. But as a sort of preparatory way, perhaps some people remain as Mitras all their lives, but I suppose it's a step along the path to the more decisive step, perhaps, of becoming an order member. And the idea of friendship, of course, spiritual friendship, is absolutely central to Triratna. So I think becoming a Mitra or a friend is very significant. As the Buddha said, do not say that friendship is half the spiritual life, Ananda. It is indeed the whole of the spiritual life. So I think being a Mitra is a very serious step and should be taken in that way. For me, it had public and personal aspects, which of course were closely linked. The public aspect, I think, was making that declaration to the Sangha, to my family, to friends, that I regarded myself as a Buddhist and I wished to be regarded as a Buddhist. And I think the personal aspect for me was particularly the sense of going to refuge to the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And the sense that this is going to transform my life and welcoming that transformation. So, what difference did it make? Well, I think for me, being a Mitra immediately opened up new possibilities and opportunities. I became more engaged with the Sangha, attended more retreats, joined a Mitra study group, and started to support the centre in various ways. And one opportunity that came up that I've really particularly enjoyed over the years is supporting courses and classes. I greatly enjoy seeing other people encountering the Dharma and seeing them flourish in all kinds of ways. And I think being able to help other people discover the supreme value of the three jewels is just a hugely rewarding experience. So why am I still a Mitra? Well, partly it's because it's a great thing to be, and for the reasons I've outlined, and I feel very comfortable with it. But partly also my life circumstances have been quite involved over the last 15 years with work and family responsibilities. But in the last couple of years or so, my Buddhist life has begun to flow with an increasing sense of purpose into a deeper and more committed stream. And joining New View, as Arthur mentioned, that was part of that process, and that's given me opportunities for deepening my practice and having closer association with the Sangha. And I have recently asked for ordination. So I'd just say to anybody who's considering becoming a Mitra, I'd wholeheartedly say, providing you feel you have a heartfelt response to the three jewels and you want to follow a Buddhist path, then I would say, go for it. It's a wonderful thing. And for me personally, I'll just finish by saying that I'm sincerely hoping that the process that I've now embarked on towards ordination may be a little bit faster than the time it took me to ask for it in the first place. So thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you very much for that, Stephen. That was really, really good to hear. Thank you for giving that talk. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to hear from Gina in a moment. And so, you know, it is my pleasure and delight, as Artisity said, it's a privilege really, like, to introduce people. And I've known Gina for about 5 years, nearly 6 years or something, and I was there for her Mitra ceremony, and I can remember that. And Gina's a woman who's absolutely full of a very, very positive energy that really wants to make a difference in the world. And she works for Karuna Trust, and they're a charity dedicated to trying to end caste discrimination, inequality and poverty in India and Nepal. She's been a solo fundraiser, so going around the streets. She can't do that at the moment because of lockdown, but going around knocking on doors, raising money. She's a brilliant fundraiser. She does Karuna door knocking appeals. She's done fundraising for the Buddhist Center. Very, very, very passionate woman. So I'm delighted now to hand over to Gina.
Thank you. Yeah, great, thanks. I found out today that 10 minutes isn't long, so I'll dive in. Yeah, so I guess I'll just talk a bit about like the early times in my Dharma life and what brought me to becoming a Mitra and also asking for donation. And I'll talk about why specifically Triratna, and also a little bit about my practice now. So about this time 7 years ago, I was in Sagwa Ghosha's Introduction to Buddhism course, and we did, I think, it must have been about the 3rd or 4th session of the 6-week course, and we were doing ethics. And I just remember feeling a real sense of relief, relief at how expansive and open ethics was in Buddhism and in Triratna. Like, I just felt like it was full of potential and us taking responsibility for ethics. And I really loved that framework. And I think that was a really, really important part of wanting to move towards the Dharma, the ethical aspect of it. That beautiful framework of ethics and how it's our responsibility and we take responsibility for our actions. And then about a year after that, I came back off my first retreat, just a short weekend retreat. I was working as a teaching assistant at the time, and I really loved the kids, but sometimes they were a handful in year 2. And just suddenly, I felt like the week or 2 after that retreat, they all were behaving quite differently and very, they were just being incredible and like quite, more engaged and present with me. And I just really noticed a change. And I think that was the first moment when I thought, oh gosh, like how I am maybe does have an effect on like my relations with others and how others actually seem to objectively be And I think, like all of conditionality, it's hard to really objectively describe like how that works, how it works. It's a bit of a mystery, but I suddenly was like, oh, actually, maybe there is something about my mind having an effect on the world. So kind of conditionality and how my mind works. And then a year after that, the autumn is a good time for me, actually. I was on my first ever Karana appeal, so fundraising for 6 weeks, living in a community with other Buddhists and going out knocking on doors in the evenings for the charity that works in India. And I mean, that whole time was like this, but I remember a particular evening cycling home and just feeling so in love with the world, so connected to everyone I'd spoken to, and everyone seemed to like be talking to me on my cycle home, just people randomly standing on the streets. I just felt like, I think this is what metta feels like, this real like just openness to all, not just being drawn to particular people who I like. So I think those three times were definitely what brought me both to asking to become a Mitra and asking for donation. So I guess there's just a real theme of kind of wanting to be like really wanting to engage with that thing that we know of interconnectedness, and engaging with that on a deeper level. So I guess that I just thought coming to Triratna and becoming a Mitra was around engaging with that more and feeling like within this community I can work on those things better. And just briefly, like why particularly in Triratna, I think the main thing is just the emphasis that we have on friendship, on kind of the relational aspect of practice, and how we have quite a range of practices. I remember going for a walk with Ratnagosha and Mitra saying, oh, so how's your practice at the moment? And I just loved that he didn't assume I meant like his meditation practice. He was like, oh, what practice do you mean? Do you mean the aspect of ethics, or the aspect of friendship, or the aspect of community living? Just remember being like, yeah, that's really true. Like we don't want to just assume that it's about a certain narrow part of practice. And I think that Triratna can really, really bring that kind of array of ways to practice. Ideally we can do them all, but some will, I definitely will benefit more from the relational community living aspects than maybe the sitting on the cushion aspect. And I think that's really great that we have that in our Sangha. I suppose there's something about us being able to walk alongside each other on this path and be different and have our different starting points and our different inspirations, but kind of moving along and supporting each other and really inspiring each other and infecting each other with faith. But what I really don't want, and I think ideally Triratna is really like that, and sometimes it can feel, or I was worried of like becoming like a Triratna Buddhist, like a homogenous blob of Triratna Buddhisty types. And I think that's actually brings me to like my practice now. It's that I need to work on really trusting that I can be myself within Triratna. I might not be like some order members who are very calm and quietly spoken. Like I can find people in the order who are more like me, and people who I relate to. And I just think that's probably what I would want to tell myself 6 years ago, that there are lots of different ways to be a Triratna Buddhist. And that's what I think is great about it. And also that's where it's easy for me as a new person who wants to get along well to project like a certain image of Triratna. I think there is actually, I'll read a poem and like calm down a bit around trying to bring the whole of myself in. I found this quite recently, and it feels like that's kind of what I'm still trying to learn to do, to bring myself, not leave other aspects, other things I'm inspired by at the door when I come to the Buddhist Center, even when it's on Zoom. There's a poem by Fernando Pessoa, a Portuguese poet. To be great, be whole. Do not exaggerate or leave out any part of you. Be complete in each thing. Put all you are into the least of your acts. Just as in each lake, with its lofty life, the whole moon shines. Yeah, so I feel like that's one of the things that I'm trying to be more of, to bring myself more. Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit of time. And I just wanted to say some more things about what I'm working with at the moment, including in relation to being a Mitra and being within the Triratna Sangha. So yeah, ideally I would like to see Triratna being more inclusive of other genders and being more actively anti-racist, and also being more really engaged in climate justice, racial justice, and caste justice. And so 2 things on that. What I'm trying to do is not move away from Triratna when there are things that I find a little bit difficult, or when I think things aren't moving quite as quickly as I would like to. So, you know, it's such a great practice as a Buddhist to work on, you know, engagement and withdrawal. It's just such a common theme, isn't it? And here it's like, how can I stay engaged when there's something that I would like to just move away from slightly? The other thing is part of like me bringing myself in, being myself as a Dharma practitioner is, yeah, doing both, being an activist and being a Buddhist. And, you know, there are people on this call who I work on really both of those things with, and I really appreciate that. And then the third thing is, I think maybe the most important, around being okay with that tension that I have, that I don't love every single aspect of Triratna, and I want to be here. So again, it's like, you know, that's what I need to do as a Buddhist, is to like manage to hold both, to manage to want change, to seek change, and also to not blame, to be loving in how I'm asking for that. And also final thing, so I want to learn to hold both, and I think actually that brings me to another real reason why I'm in Triratna still, and that's seeing how there are many in some order members, quite a lot, who do that, you know, people in the order and the Sangha, who are able to really hold 2 different things in a world where there's so much polarity. I think that's really needed right now. And seeing those conversations that I mentioned that I would like to have more of, seeing those happen in quite a caring way where people are listening to each other, that's another reason why. So there's the initial reasons of like coming to Triratna, and I think seeing how many people in the order and in the movement are relating to what's going on at the moment is actually a real reason why I am a Mitra still, 6 years on. Okay, almost stuck to time. Bye.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Gina. Thank you. That was a really a lovely talk. Really appreciate you giving that and sharing with us. So thank you. Okay, so now we're going to hear from Adele. So Adele, I first met coming along to Sangha Night in the Buddhist Centre, when we were actually all able to go into the Buddhist Centre. And I have this sense of Adele, she's sort of thrown herself right in and been really engaging with the Buddha Dharma Sangha ever since she's arrived. And already she's part of the Sangha Night team and does the hosting and things like that. She's got this incredible generosity and just really open, really open. So it's a great delight, and it takes a lot of courage to give these talks as well. You know, and Adele isn't a Mitra yet, but she's waiting for her ceremony date to be confirmed. Yeah, it takes a lot of courage to come and give talks. So I'm going to hand over to Adele at this point.
Thank you for your Jyoti. Okay, so yeah, this is my first talk ever in the centre or on Zoom, so wish me luck. I thought I would start by sharing some background on myself. So I was born in London and I moved out when I was 27. I'm a half Latino. My father is from Guyana and my mother is, well, she was half English, half French, and born in the West Country of England. My mother's family stopped talking to my mother and the rest of us when I was about 10 years old. So from that point on, it was only my father's family I had contact with, which was my nan, my aunt, and a few uncles. My mother's family were all pagans. So this did have some influence at the beginning of my childhood, my early years. But the main religion I was brought up in was my father's, which is an indigenous South American religion with multiple gods and semi-gods and tree spirits. In this religion, there is a rebirth with a type of punishment linked to it. So it's not the same as Buddhism. The rebirth happens until all lessons are learned, is what you're taught. And once all your lessons have been learned, then you can move on to the next plane. So this type of religion has a lot of ritual in it as well, but it involves a lot of drug taking and sometimes like chicken sacrifices, which I never really connected with. I wasn't too keen on those ritual sides of things. So I first looked into Buddhism about 8 to 9 years ago. When I first looked into it, it was all very scary and a bit overwhelming. I stumbled over a lot of talk about suffering, which I didn't really understand, and spiritual death, which really, really, truly put me off, the spiritual death. So I turned instead to the 8 limbs of yoga and the spiritual practice of yoga, which was satisfying for a good few years, but eventually this practice didn't feel like it was enough. So I started searching for a bit more. Last summer, I've been having a bit of a tough time at work, and I was looking after my sick dog who had brain cancer. And then something inside me, I'm not sure what, just maybe one day Google Buddhism books, and I stumbled across Windhorse. I bought 3 books, one by Chris Pauling and one by Sangha, which this led me to Triratna, and then with a bit of Googling, it led me to the Cambridge Buddhist Centre. So the first time I came to the CBC was for the Introduction to Buddhism and Meditation course. When I first started the course, I met my first order members and Mitras, and what I recall when I first walked in was a really warm feeling. It was like I was completely welcomed and I was completely accepted as I am. It was really lovely. It was really just lovely and welcoming. I found myself connecting and clicking with all aspects of the course. I'd always loved chanting, and I discovered I love rituals and pujas. But what I connected with the most was the ethics. When I was taught the 5 precepts, these just made sense to me. At the time, when I first learned the 5 precepts, I thought this is really easy, to be honest. I was already a vegetarian. I didn't steal. I didn't do any sexual misconduct. Wasn't an issue. I'm very honest, and I don't drink or take drugs. So I was thinking, tick, 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 no problem. Then as my knowledge and understanding extended and deepened, I realised there was a lot more to the ethics than I initially thought. I started to understand that the 4th precept is a lot more than just being honest, and that the 1st precept is not just ticked with being a vegetarian. That in fact, with blunt honesty, without the thought of others, with your speech, this can result in failing with the 1st precept because I've harmed someone with my words. So after my course, I continued to come to Sangha Night I went on a retreat, and I've done a couple more courses and retreats online. Now, it hasn't been perfect all the time. And sometimes when I come to Sangha Night or even on courses, I really don't have a clue what anyone's saying. Like, as people are giving talks, I'm not understanding the meanings. It's completely going over my head. One of the things that's also been really lovely about CBC is when this has happened, there's been order members and mitras that I've been able to go to and ask lots of questions and discuss the talks. Everyone's been absolutely lovely and taken time to explain all the Buddhist concepts to me. For example, what dukkha actually is, because from the talks, you know, I needed some help with that. And then after that period of time, things started to get a bit harder. I did have a very difficult childhood, and I have had some therapy in the past, and I've done some self-work. And I did think all of this was in my past, that it didn't impact who I was anymore. Now I think I was very wrong about that. And I was unaware of my conditioning and how much more work I could do on myself. So this is a negative way of seeing it. In other ways, I started to see my potential. But being honest, I'm a bit of a glass half empty person, which isn't that popular to say, but yeah, stuck in a bit of negative thoughts. And also I do think not everyone is glass half full people. So after this time, at this time, I met up with a very close Sangha friend, and we were talking about practicing Buddhism and what it was like to be a Buddhist, when the thought just popped into my head that this, you know, this Buddhist thing is really tough. It's really challenging, but it's definitely worth it. When I've noticed times when I feel myself being triggered and I've managed to stop myself reacting in my autopilot, fiery Latino way, I feel it's definitely is worth it. And when I manage to control how I'm being with someone, and I can bring kindness to my actions and my speech, then it's all worth it. When I think about it, this means less suffering for me, because when I'm triggered and act unskillfully, I always shoot the second arrow mentally. I feel awful. So even though it's tough, at times it can be really tough practicing the Dharma, it's definitely worth it for me. So why am I becoming a Mitra? I want to openly and honestly say, yes, I'm a Buddhist. I'm eager and ready to continue to study the Dharma and ethical living. I want to continue to work on myself to try and reach my potential. So why Triratna? I find myself very receptive to the way the Dharma is taught in Triratna, and the Triratna Sangha is everything I've been looking for. I'm deepening my practice and learning at the same time. I always enjoy everything I do with Triratna. At times, yes, as I've said, it's challenging and difficult, but it's also very fulfilling and joyful. I've made some wonderful friends from the courses I was on, and a few more from Sangha Night, who I really love, and I'm so grateful to have them in my life. I'm also grateful and honoured to be part of the Sangha. Sometimes I do feel like maybe it's a mistake, and I'm not really part of the Sangha, but because how could I be so lucky to be part of this Sangha and the opportunities I do have to study the Dharma with such wonderful teachers and friends. So becoming a Mitra just seems the natural thing for me to do, and I'm very, very grateful for the privilege. That's me.
Thank you, Adele. Thank you for that very, very lovely talk, very heartfelt talk. And yeah, so thank you to all of our speakers, and do respond in the chat if you wish to, just to let the speakers know you express your appreciation or whatever it is about their talks. You know, as I said earlier, it takes a lot to come on Zoom. It takes a lot to give a talk anyway. but then to just come on and talk about very personally about your practice is such a gift to us all. So thank you, Stephen, Gina and Adele.